Om Ramanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Advaititam Gagana Sadrasham Tattvama Shadilaksham Ekam Nitsham Vimalamatchalam Sarvati Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. We salute that one who is the essence of life and existence, and whom the various sages call by various names. Our salutations to that one who is beyond life and death, pleasure and pain, and all other pairs of opposites. Our eternal salutations to that one whom the devotees meditate in the shrine of their hearts, enjoying the deepest contemplations. May he prompt our minds toward the path of truth and righteousness and reveal himself into our souls. Om peace, peace, peace. For there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us. May that Brahman sustain us. May that Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness, free us from fault-finding, and reveal to us the essence of the scriptures. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat. And the essence of the scriptures today pertains to the Niralamba Upanishad, which is one of those 108 Upanishads left over. And it follows very nicely, as I was just saying before class started, to those present here, that on the trail of the Samkhya Yoga retreat we gave last weekend for actually a 3-day, half-day seminar, and where we went through all the tattvas of Lord Kapula's Samkhya system. That's mentioned almost right at the top here in the Upanishad. They're calling Ishvara the Great Sankhyan, both capitalized. So we see the connections are coming closer and being made for us, so that we don't just study a philosopher like Samkhya and detach it somehow from everything else, but we want to look more towards connecting it in towards everything, because everything flows out of unmanifested to manifested, as we learned. But there's a immovable substratum, which we'll look at a little today, which underlies it all. And that's what the Upanishad here is trying to tell us by the word Niralamba. Nira, of course, is like nirvikalpa, nirvana, nirbijam. That prefix on the word in Sanskrit means pretty much to be devoid of or empty of, not there. And lambana means any kind of support. So that Brahman, which they're talking about in terms of 40 questions, this Upanishad asks right out the top, and then later on gives the answer to each one in a row, is without supports. That is, it relies upon nothing else for its existence. That's the idea. And so Brahman is the only one of the principles, if you want to call it that, which is like that. Everything else, even the Mahat and Ishvara, will have it as their support. And in the case of nature, it will have unmanifested seeds as its support. Although in this Upanishad, it does make a very beautiful point that everything that's in Prakriti is based on intelligence. So they go more towards the mind with it, more than any intelligence than towards insentiency. When you make the point about it being insentient, you're trying to contrast it to that which is innately intelligent, not what it borrows intelligence. So nature borrows its light from everything in terms of na tatra suryabhati, na chandra tarakam, name of Vidyutobhanti, Kuto Yamagnihi, all the light that's in fire and moon and sun, and stars, lightning and so forth, is borrowed from that sentient principle, Brahman, and then thinks it shines by its own light. And we have a good time laughing at the poor little glowworm who comes out and thinks he illumines everything. That then somebody walks by with a torch and he's shamed. And the moon comes out and he's further shamed, goes back into hiding. So that's what will happen with the light that's in Prakriti. It happens in deep sleep, it goes away. It happens in death, and it happens in samadhi, which is more important than previous two. Those things that have more staying power are Ishvara, the Mahat, the great Sankhyan. There's supports for everything else, but Brahman needs those supports. So enough said about the definition for Niralambana. We'll leave it at that. And, again, whether it's a gross omission or it's just the nature of things, in the 40 questions of this Upanishad, it's asking, what is this? What is that? And it does the same with Brahman. And beautifully, I like right away the first two slokas. First, they say, what is Brahman? And then, what is God, or who is God? So they're making a distinction in Indian tradition, a distinction that we never made or heard of in Christianity, is there's a difference between the formless reality and God with form, called a savior or an exemplar, or in our tradition, an avatar. So there are two then. Put Prakriti aside for now, because there are two of those too, right? Manifested, unmanifested. But when you go toward the most conscious and aware principles, you have Brahman and Ishvara. So they're asking right away at the top, what is Brahman and who is God? So they really have it, their terms right. And if you don't just run through those and say, oh, those are questions. Okay, I know. Now let's get to the answers. But you actually analyze the questions. That's beautiful. And I always used to say that about the question, who am I? That was proposed way back by Lord Vashishta, all the way up to present time with Ramana Maharshi, called Atma Vichara, is that as you ask the question, who am I? You shouldn't be waiting for the answer. In a sense, the answer is obvious. Thou art that. And the earmark of this Upanishad, if you look it up, whatever commentators have looked at it, because Shankara didn't get a chance to in his short 32-year-old life, they're saying right off the top that these questions that are being answered are receiving answers after all 40 of them have passed. So the first slokas, say 40 some slokas, are all about the question, looking down. And so you can read through half the Upanishad and get it read if you just take up the questions. But going back and looking at the questions actually gives somebody like me, who's Chartananda, they call me, you like to put everything into visuals, gives me a chance to assign my 415 charts to date to all of these questions and have kind of a field day. Therefore, that is a yogic field day. And therefore, I've been assigning this Upanishad a 5-Sunday length. We'll take up the 4 Sundays in January and the first Sunday in February before many of us in SRV go on retreat to Rishikesh to study the Word. So in that time then, over 5 Sundays, we'll have lots of time and lots of space to spread out and see some of the answers to this question. So these commentators that have looked at this Upanishad are basing all of these questions on one thing. It's not to show off their compassion or to illustrate, like Sampa Yoga does, how many things there are in the universe. The first sloka answers that. It says, I shall raise and answer questions which must be known for liquidating the misfortunes of living beings who are plunged in ignorance. Talk about your immediate out front statement that an Indian Rishi would immediately jump to the chase with. So it's not doing a lot of introduction or qualifying itself. It just jumps right in and said, here are 40 questions that I'm raising. The reason I'm raising them is that I want to dissolve all the sufferings that come up for people who are still in ignorance about the nature of such things. So that's uh, why we look at uh, the first sloka very seriously. And then the second sloka is what I said already. What is Brahman? Who is God? That's the first two questions. And in that way, then, they make this fine distinction between absolute reality, which is formless, free of supports, and then the who, which is the supreme personality called Ishvara, who comes into form and is the primeval archetypical soul, if you want to put it that way. And we learned last week that that would be somewhat synonymous with Purusha, although Ishvara is much grander than that. But there is a sentient principle, and then there's an insentient servant, is the idea. So here we have God and his main emissary, you might say, Brahman and Ishvara, posed in one sloka, sloka number 2. So we'll look into that. We'll also look into the third sloka. The next thing they ask is, who is the living being? The way it's phrased is that, as I was about to say, all the commentators of this Upanishad, here are 40 questions, and there's only one answer to all of them. And that's it. They're all Brahman. So I'm taking it in a different direction, or else the class would be about 10 minutes long. And the questions should all be answered in a thrice, as they say. But this is the opinion of everyone who studies this Upanishad as a guru or as an acharya, as a seer, as a great commentator, is that all of these 40 questions just have one answer. It's all Brahman. That's the conclusion of the Upanishads too. The Vedanta Dindima, it's called, the great conclusion of everything here is that it's all Brahman. But we'll take a little different tack to the side of that, keeping that in mind. That's the non-dual truth we want to keep with us. And we'll look individually at each of these questions, because the Upanishad then does deign to move into its answers. Might as well give you the answer, since I've given you the question to the first two slokas. What is Brahman? Brahman is the ineffable spirit. It appears as the Mahat, the great Sankhyan, then the ego, then the elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, then the macrocosm and all its activities, knowledge, and its ends. And they're still talking about Brahman. So this is why all is Brahman, because Brahman appears first and then everything comes spilling out of it. And then it'll use the Mahat, the great mind, to do that. And Prakriti will be there as seeds in the great mind, as we learned last weekend. It goes on because it's a long answer. It's the only long answer here to what is Brahman. It is replete with all powers and without beginning and end. It is non-dual and free from all adjuncts. It may be spoken of as pure, good, quiescent, unqualified, period. So that's their answer to the question, what is Brahman? Then who is God? God is the veritable Brahman that, depending on its power, called Prakriti, creates the worlds and it enters into them as the inner controller of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, etc. He is called Ishvara, as he controls the intellect and the sense organs. So very clear expose about Brahman and its underlying non-dual, unchanging, beginningless, endless presence. And then Ishvara that comes out replete with Prakriti, and uses, invests the cosmic mind Mahat with the power to, as the Trinity does, create, preserve, and destroy, or what we like to say, project, sustain, and dissolve everything in cycles. and so projects it and withdraws it back in all its goodness, in all its quiescence, and in all its huge or replete with all its powers. So those are the answers for the first two questions. Now we can flesh those out, as they say, by looking at a couple charts about Brahman. First one here is how they can put names to the nameless, formless Brahman. Let's look at that. And the Taittiriya Upanishad can help us explain this Niralamba Upanishad some. Out of the Taittiriya Upanishad says, out of fear of Brahman the wind blows, the sun rises, Indra presides. Okay, well here, question 9 of the 40 is, who is Indra? So we'll get to that. Indra presides, he's the god of the gods. So he would come, after Ishvara, but before the gods in the pantheon of various manifestations of Prakriti. Death bows low to it, and the cosmic sets of fives come out of it, carry on their respective functions. Here's in one of the Upanishads that keeps true to that idea of quintuplications. Everything comes out in fives. The individual soul only becomes fearless when it attains firm and peaceful ground in that supreme reality. So you must ground yourself in Brahman. Maybe take our minds and put it on Brahman alone in our meditations. Even the wise man falls victim to fear if he fails to reflect on Brahman. So you can be into nature, you can be into religion, you can be into seeking knowledge, you can be into the Savior, you can even be into Ishvara, but if you don't reflect on Brahman, then you're always going to be subject to fear. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha ananda brahmana vidvan nabibeti kutasjaneti. Another Upanishad says, and Shankara echoes that in his scripture Viveka Chudamani, when he says that one who contemplates Brahman, which is actually beyond the power of the speech to explain, beyond the power of the mind to comprehend, rids himself of fear for all time. All doubt and fear goes away. So this is what the experience of the Rishis has been when they contemplate Brahman. But when they contemplate anything else short of Brahman, then there's always, as Gaudapada says in Diskarika, this brooding, this fear that creeps into the whole process. That's why I started out chanting today, may Brahman illumine our thinking process. Because if Brahman does it, then all of those undesirable concomitants will get dissolved. But if anyone else does it, it's not going to go away necessarily for you. That's one of the main points for attaining formless samadhi and not just remaining in the realm of form, no matter how pleasure it might be, i.e. what Gaudapada calls the lila. Why would God want to sport, he says, because he's got his grounding in this niralambana, right? In this foundationless Brahman. If it doesn't have any foundations, it doesn't have any fear of foundations being taken away. You can put it that way. So therefore, what do they call it? And this can go really quick, and it's very beautiful, the uncaused cause. They say Brahman can't be the cause of anything. Cause and effect happen from Ishvara down, particularly from Mahat down. The Trinity also suffers cause and effect in a sense, but they're masters of cause and effect, like the gunas. And so they know how to transcend them and return to Brahman. And they act as examples for that, like when they appear as the avatar. So the uncaused cause is, these are short statements that seem to be contradictory of themselves, but basically are very good ways of naming the nameless Brahman. The next one is the inactive agent. Vegetables dance in the pot. See, the kid thinks the vegetables have life, but the mother said, no, that's the water that's making them dance. Then the father said, no, it's the heat in the water that's making them dance. Grandfather comes in and says, no, it's the gas running to the stove underneath that's making them dance. And all that gas comes from a gas company running under the street, under their house, into the stove. So there's also always a subtler cause to that effect, and that effect has another cause, and so forth. Back to the source, that's called tracing origins. That's why I want to look at this chart at one point and just go through it real quick as our signature chart for this 5 classes, because I didn't have to make a new signature chart. It was already laid out for me in the Upanishad with charts that I've already composed earlier. So the inactive agent comes out as one saying, the unmoved mover. Everything moves by its presence, but it itself doesn't move. It's like, how does the wind move? By the thought wind in the great mind. If it thinks that that's the movement of thought, when thought moves, then everything that follows out of thought, like the 5 elements here, they're saying, will also move. So they all get animated by that. So I don't know if I put it here, so you can say the inanimate animator too. Then there's the unseen seer, and my favorite, the unstruck sound, because I like sound, not a Brahma pass and music and so forth. So those two are very precious. Unseen seer means it sees everything, but itself is never seen. That's utkramantam stiti vyapi bhunjanam in the Gita, according to Sri Krishna. They don't see who have vimuda nanupashanti. Vimuda, they have delusion because they don't see. They don't have peace. But they see who jnana chakshu, who have opened their inner eye. So that's where the unseen seer, you can see it's holding one of those pots with that single eye in it. And then next to it's the Om sign on another pot. So those two, unseen seer, unstruck sound, are very good ways of representing and describing this indescribable Brahman. The creator, because we say nothing can get destroyed because it was never really created. It can get dissolved because it got projected. And that's a teaching that's common to all the mind-only schools, including the schools of Buddhism. Is that you look at the mind and you see everything rising up and out of it. How Samkhya Yoga would describe that was, oh, that's the Prakriti coming into, from the cosmic mind down into manifestation, and it begins to rise in the individual mind and fall. That's when it wakes and dreams and goes into deep sleep. It rises, then it falls, rises, then it falls. If it can develop the beneficial habit of meditation, then it can go beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep and watch it rise and fall without being involved in it. See, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep does not free you from involvement in the phenomena, but witness consciousness does. So, and then your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep will become more conscious. That's how to wake up for your dreams and make your deep sleep aware state, is to always master the witness consciousness of it. So this is all implied in the creator. In other words, you could say it doesn't create because nothing's ever created. You can't get something out of nothing. But it has, if it weren't there, everything wouldn't come into being. Then there's the unborn procreator. Some of these are of my own composition, maybe a little bit more clumsy than something as beautiful as the unstruck sound, but nonetheless, you get the idea. Like the mind-born sons of Lord Brahma, they're born out of the thoughts of his mind and then go back to his mind. So in that way, the unborn Brahma is father to them all, and they just simply emanate. No more birth in the womb of matter for me, Ram Prasad sings, only emanation from my divine mother. So that emanation is the thing for these souls that come and go without attachment. Then there's, and speaking of that, the unattached lover that, like the greatest souls we know, from Buddha to Jesus on down to Swami Vivekananda, had this intense love for all beings, for the Atman in all beings to be more specific. And therefore, they have this great love, but their idea is to help free you from things that are keeping you from enjoying that great love inside of yourself. Love for the self, love for others. At the four-armed deity's feet here, you see the formless refuge. So that's a point on the side of formlessness again. And the seminar I was teaching that, and we talked about it at satsang yesterday amongst some of us who joined, is that formlessness is something that needs to be worked into the equation of our thinking process so that we don't need to fear it anymore. And one way metaphor used is, do you really fear going into deep sleep? If you have bad dreams, you might fear going into dream, but that all goes away when you go into deep sleep. And then you wake up and saying, well, I don't know what happened to me. All I know is I feel great. So you come out of deep sleep feeling that way. So that's a point in favor of engendering consciousness of formlessness in us. And remember, we're making a distinction between formlessness with a small f and formlessness with a capital F. So formlessness with a small f would be Prakriti disappearing on you, back to its seeds. That happens as a natural consequence of the presence of sentient awareness, which then withdraws seeds, see, back into the deep sleep in the mind. Then there's two others there, the unknowable knower and the impersonal presence. All of these are seemingly contradictory to themselves, and that's the way in which you put positive and negatives together to try and come up with some idea of what this Niralamba is, this foundationless Brahman. And also should say that Mother Durga's name is Niralamba too. She's named that. So I was saying, unfortunately, earlier that she's not mentioned here in the questions. So she always manages to escape detection in that way. So, and they also aren't saying here, what is prana or what is tanmatra? So you see how these subtle principles that the souls probably saw in meditation but didn't know how to name and didn't know what order they were coming in necessarily, escaped putting down in words, in print, as it were. And then you had to sort of suss them out yourself. That's what happens in the case of Mother Durga, who is Niralamba. That's it. She's also sometimes called clothed in space, Digambara. So she wears space as her clothing. So that's how invisible she is. You're trying to look at space and all you see is space, but you don't see her as space. So that's very Anaranian. That's subtle. I think that comes up in one of the quotes here. The subtlemost of the subtle, they call that. Well, I extended myself a little further and then came up with some other ones. There's the uninvolved participant. It's like saying, God doesn't deign to come into action or into form, but nonetheless, its presence gives rise to form and action. There's the inanimate animator. I mentioned that above. There's the transcendent pervader. So there's how to say, if I say ethers and everything. It's all pervasive everywhere, but it also shoots through and through objects. But you see, the object is like shutting off air, not letting much air in, but it's not shutting out ether, which is undisplaceable. So in that way, you try and reason about things here in the realm of the five elements to help explain that which underlies the five elements. And that's why you could come up with a beautiful appellation called the transcendent pervaded. Pervades everything, but I can't quite distinguish it. I have to separate it out like wheat from chaff. Then there's the immutable transformer. It stays the same, but everything else changes under its purvey. See? So that's a very beautiful one to contemplate. And there's the indivisible multiplier. So you extend your mind into these regions to look for these dichotomous expressions, and you find out that they work very well in philosophy. And then you can say, well, they say nobody can explain Brahman. Well, I've got a dozen things here by which I can explain Brahman to you. After you get done explaining it, people are still stultified, see. Because then they have to go back and think about them. So what you're saying here are three-word koans in Vedanta. They're like what happens in Zen, but this is what happens in Advaita Vedanta. You can't know something, you can't see something, you can't understand something, then this is where you go to help understand it. For instance, Tattvamasi is a three-word koan, as it were. They call those mahavakyas in our tradition. So great sayings, because just those three words can throw a sensitive person into a higher state of mind, that is intelligence. And they can also make an unawakened person begin to wonder about the nature of things. Oh, I must be missing something here because I'm not getting it. So, somebody said that everything's multiplying around here, but there's something underneath it that doesn't multiply. There's something changing around here, but that which underlies it doesn't change. And it sort of looks like all the five elements on top of Earth. If you want to put Earth at the top of the pyramid, then it's the steady thing. Everything else, all the other four are changing around it. So this is this unseen seer that we're talking about. Sri Ramakrishna puts it in a simple story. He says, at times the snake sits still. At other times it wriggles across the ground. But it is all the same snake. Again, the snake contains poison within it, but it does not die because of that. And then would go on to say, but you could die if you got bitten by it. That is, if you got taken into Maya, and you could lose awareness of Brahman and commit a kind of spiritual suicide by going to death without your mind fixed upon divine reality called Brahman. That's it. That's how we answer in our own way the first question there, or actually, the first question, but the second sloka, what is Brahman? It's all of this, and all of these also pertain to different areas of thought. The seer pertains to the eye, the unstruck sound pertains to the ear. So all of these can be connected to areas in our consciousness that have concomitants, associates in Prakriti, so that we can connect these back to the source. Let's look at the next chart, because this whole 5 Sundays will be a sort of a chart fest that we're going to take up, so that, as I said, the Rishi here is answering 40 questions. It may be the same answer, but that's penultimately, we want to see what kind of answers can appeal to our intelligence more, and therefore give us a clue. And so these that I just showed you are pretty simple, but this next one is a little bit more philosophically in nature, and nonetheless very well gathered and thought out, and also from references that are actually strewn through the Upanishads. I know it's hard to read, and I'll be taking you through them, and they'll be highlighted on the screen for you. But basically, you can see that there are 4 different so-called divisions of Brahman. From the bottom up, Sakshi, which I just mentioned, witness. Of course, in witness, there's a little difference between you and what you're seeing. When you become one with Brahman, that difference disappears. So there's no ego in that. In the meantime, as Sri Ramakrishna said, keep your ego in the state of a child or a servant. the students here in the class say. So that's what we learned in satsang with one of the God blogs. God blogs. It's basically, if the ego can be kept in the state of a child or a servant, it's non-harmful until it can become fully mature, and that's when sakshi comes forward. Kutastha is next, underlying substratum, that means. And then also antaryami, which is mentioned here in the Upanishad. We just read about it, didn't we? When it explained to us the nature of Ishvara. Now it's the antaryami, it says. And so that's a beautiful word in Sanskrit that you come upon. Oh yes, they use it in English. Its power called Prakriti creates the worlds and enters into them as the inner controller. Inner controller means antaryami. Antar means inner, and yama, of course, means to control. Like the yamas of yoga, or like Dharmaraja, the god of death. That's a question that comes here. Who is death? Who is the father of, who is the god called death? Comes up soon. So they're already looking at death as just a god that helps you transition from one place to another, instead of some black death that you never return from because you only live once and you're just a physical object instead of a sentient soul. So Sakshi, Kutashta, then Antaryami, and finally the Pratyagatman. I often tell the story of a Swami. I asked his name and he said, "I'm Swami Pratyagatananda." And do you know what that means? And thankfully I did know a little bit about what that meant. But that's another great cross-section, you might call it, or a level of Brahman subtlety. All of these, this isn't speculation, because we know Brahman is one, indivisible, nameless, formless, and all that. But you'll hear it described in the Upanishads in these ways. Let's actually look at some of those ways, because some of these are taken straight out of certain Upanishads. Starting at the bottom, let's see here what the quotes say. Let's actually take the Kaivalya Upanishad's quote at the top. That which is the supreme Brahman is the soul of all, the great support for the universe, called Ati Sukshma, subtler than the most subtle and eternal, and that is thyself. So basically, that's answering all the questions, including who is the living being, is going to be, well, that's yourself, that's Brahman. And they're calling it here the great support, not just, of course, the usual support, but it supports everything through Ishvara and Mahat. So that becomes clear as we go on. To take the Sarva Upanishad's take on it, it says, like clay in pots, like gold in ornaments, like thread in fabric, it is subtle like these. That Brahman is the antecedent, all-pervading consciousness in all. So they finally use beautiful metaphors, gold flecks in rivers and so forth, sesame seed and oils, one of our oil and sesame seeds is one of our favorites, but finally it just comes right down to saying it. It's the antecedent, consciousness and everything. Before life and mind was the Atman, is another one way that's put in Sanskrit too. So these two Upanishads sandwich, from the Kaivalya Upanishad to the Sarva Upanishad, sandwich these great sayings that were being inspired to bring out by the Niralamba Upanishad. Let's start at the bottom of this chart at Sakshi. You see on the left-hand side, we define it, self-luminous witness of all beings, and of all beings and phenomena in relativity. So it witnesses all of this. All beings means the jivas, or the individual souls. That's coming up here. Who's the living being is the next question. So we're already beginning to bridge that. Across, Sakshi is called, on the other side, cognizer of the presence and absence of knower, knowledge, and knowable. So there's a triputi there that Sri Krishna mentions in the Gita, the seer and the seen and what is seeing. Imagine going beyond that. And that's what they're talking about here as Brahman, as the Sakshi. It's no longer caught in that triputi. That's a very high triputi. Knower, knowledge, and what to know, or seer and seeing, and seen and seeing. But imagine then how Brahman, if one goes into that level of Brahman called the Sakshi, or witness, how it transcends that triputi and all other triputis too, like, say, the three gunas that we learned about last weekend. Right there's a quote around Sakshi from the Mundaka Upanishad this time. As the spider emits and withdraws its web, as herbs sprout from the soil of the earth, and as hair grows on the head without any effort, so from imperishable being, the universe springs forth. So we look around for these various manifestations or expressions in relativity to explain the effortlessness of the all-pervasive Brahman, this underlying everything. If that weren't there, again, like the heat and the water that causes the vegetables to dance, take that away and everything stops moving. That's the inanimate animator we called earlier. So keep these in mind as we go forth. So basically this chart isn't that hard to study. We've just taken 1/4 of it, okay, with the two quotes from the Upanishads and with these two definitions of what Sakshi means. Let's move up to Kutastha. Intelligence residing in all that is unreal, from Lord Brahma down to an ant. That's a symbolic and very cogent saying out of the Upanishads. On the other side, it says undifferentiated presence in and as the intelligence of all beings. So it would be the most intelligent of the intelligent ones, as we Chetanas Chetana, Nicho Nichanam, that beautiful chant that we've memorized. We have to look at it that way rather than just, oh, look at how intelligent you are, or I have intelligence. We have to look at it as the greatest intelligence that resides in those who have intelligence. And then we put this higher spin on it, which helps us then not to dumb it down or bring it down into nature or over-personalize it. We leave it in the impersonal realm. And the quote there from the Katha Upanishad this time is, the Atman, hidden in all beings, reveals itself not to all, but is seen only by the seers of the subtle through their refined and pointed intellects. So the seers have given some real deep thought to this and have written Upanishads like we've just pulled from. We've now, thanks to Niralamba Upanishad, we've heard from the Kaivalya Upanishad, we've heard from the Mundaka Upanishad, we've heard from the Katha Upanishad and the Sarva Upanishad. So these are 108 of these are left. That's what we've been studying for months now, so that we really avail ourselves completely of Vedanta, because Vedanta is Upanishad. Upanishad is Vedanta. It's the end of the Vedas where the Upanishads appeared. That was the apt conclusion of everything. And you're seeing evidence of it here with these very profound, highly intelligent sayings that come from the Rishis. All right, so we've in one breath, as it were, taken half of this chart and looked at the quotes. Remember, we're talking about subtle levels of this absolute being. Although ultimately, yes, it has no levels. It's just one homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness. We keep that at the background, sometimes bring it to the foreground, but keep that in the background as we study these sayings of different rishis that had opened their inner eye of wisdom to look at it. Antaryami, that comes next. The inner ruler immortal, seated in the hearts of all, free of all differentiations. So we have changes and mutable things happening. We have adjuncts put over stuff, superimpositions covering things. Now they're talking also about the differences in things. All of those go away. You're talking about Brahman just the other day and this morning. Well, just sitting there looking out the window, said, well, there's the tree. You don't see the sap. running through it. You don't see the roots hidden under the ground. Brahman's like that. Yet nonetheless, then the ground could be that foundation, could be that Niralamba, foundationless foundation for all plants, all trees. So there are things unseen dancing in front of us, even in nature. We just tend to take a look at those, and then we use them symbolically to describe that I have a great feeling here, that there's an inner ruler immortal seated in my heart. You see, I feel this in more than an emotional feel. It's an intuitive feel. It's more than an intuitive feel. It's a conscious feel. So pretty soon you're going beyond emotions, emotionality, and the one who's having the emotions. And then you're putting this all together into this one sound principle called antaryami. On the other side, it says, interwoven in all, like the thread which rubs through a string of jewels. Sri Krishna uses that in the Gita too. Yeah. The quote there from this time, the Setashvatara Upanishad, says, the indivisible soul is as subtle as a hairpoint divided and subdivided hundreds of times, yet he is potentially infinite. He has to be known beyond gender, because I've just used the word he twice, so they'll put that in quick. Beyond gender, whatever body he assumes, he becomes identified with. So this is the power of identifying and disidentifying. My teacher used to say, yes, when you come here, you learn how to detach. He's talking about Western people coming to a Swami in a Vedanta center. But then pretty soon, later on, he starts to say, now that you've learned to detach, now you can attach again. So that's the point. You'll be able to detach and attach at will. That's a yogi. And so that would mean from Prakriti. It would mean from your family and your kids. Attach to them when you need to help serve them. Detach from them when you need to meditate on the formless Brahman. Attach to them when you meditate on Brahman. Attach to them when you want to study the Niralamba Upanishad. So you're constantly having your consciousness in a state of free association. That's really the point of it. And then you're a free soul. You're a jivan mukta, wandering around the earth. So we took a third bite then out of these four subtle levels of Brahman. It's a chart that we really very rarely ever see or go through. It's in footfalls of the Indian rishis, but it's good to take it apart to answer this question in sloka 2 of our Upanishad today. What is Brahman? And do you feel like you know Brahman a little bit better now? Do you know the unknowable just a little bit more by its names, as we were saying here, unseen, seer, and so forth, now by its so-called divisions? That's the point here, is that we're getting to know the formless reality a little better. Now we have something to rely upon in our meditation when all of a sudden we see form disappear, and we're not just going to be stunned, you see. As my guru told me, there are some divine attributes that I'm going to see next. Oh, what's that sound of the flute? What's that sound of the kettle drum? What's that opening in my forehead that's happening about now? That's coming and going. And all of these things then are going to be shored up, supported, if you will, by these higher aspects of Ishvara, lower aspects of Brahman. See, it's the higher Brahman, it's the lower Atman. So let's go on and look at Pratyagatman. On the left-hand side, a homogeneous mass of consciousness free of all limiting adjuncts. One of my favorite expressions in English for it, homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness. That just does it for me. You see, I think, well, you can't really, there's really no attribute there, is there? Is homogeneous really an attribute? When you think about it, it just actually integrates all attributes. And then unbounded, you could put in there. It's a mass without boundaries. Then all of a sudden you're getting this sense of the infinite, the eternal. And that is Brahman. On the other side, the quote says, the entity thou, that which is, and is of the nature of pure conscious awareness. You can see there's really very little to say at the level of the Pratyugatman. The mind and speech draw back in awe, trying to understand or describe it, as I just chanted out of Shankara. And then there is one more quote there, and we've actually taken these 4 levels of this apparently difficult chart to understand, but now I should say it's not going to be easy to contemplate the formless Brahman, especially for a culture like ours and a time like ours, which we have been getting teachings on it for a while. Talking to an Indian man yesterday who was hosting a class I was giving, we made that point together, basically, where is liberation, in any other religion? Liberation from what? You mean heaven? I mean, so there's just nowhere to go in most of our cultures that has to do with beyond form. We always have to think about form as being real, worlds being real, actions being real, everything that comes from action, families, money, to be real. Vedanta just comes and pretty much blows that out of the water because it wants you to know about the formless reality, which has no worries, which has no brooding, which has no creation and no destruction. Where else are you going to go for that? You can sport and Leela with divine forms, but at one point, Sri Ramakrishna said, I had to ask the Divine Mother, is there somewhere that has no separation? Because when I contemplate Shiva, I still feel separation between me, right? Well, that's here at Sakshi, right? I'm having a witness of these deities, these gods. So he said later, pretty soon after I had experience of the Satchidananda, I had to take down the gods and goddesses off my wall. I couldn't even cut a lemon, he says, because that meant 2 halves, and it just didn't appeal to me, you see. You feel like it's not just a matter of doing violence to the lemon, it's a matter of leaving everything the way it is, whole, complete, you see. It's the ultimate kind of ahimsa, nonviolence. It's just to leave it perfect like it is. So we need to know about that perfection. And thou art that is the end of that sloka we just said. Basically, all of that, thou art that. Tat tvamasi. So the final quote here from the Kaivalya Upanishad again, that is the substratum, the bliss, the indivisible consciousness in whom the 3 worlds dissolve. Realizing the Atman, abiding in the heart, partless, secondless, beyond existence and non-existence, one attains the Paramatman. So that's, of course, Brahman, or Para-Brahman, they would call that too. So you see, these minor Upanishads aren't so minor. I'm calling that affectionately because so many of them didn't get commented on by the great Shankara. Only 10 or 11 did. So I hope that you've enjoyed this tour through non-dual realms. You didn't board a bus. You had to leave your body a bit. You had to transcend your senses, and the vehicle you used was just the Divine Mother's mouthpiece called the Acharya. And then you learned about something that maybe you don't have an occasion to think about so often, but which is nonetheless the underlying substratum for everything. Just like we breathe air and don't see it. We see the effects of the wind, but we don't see it. There's so many things unseen that are indispensable to our existence. But of all the unseens, the Brahman is the ultimate of those. It can even be sung about as we transition from Brahman to Ishvara. There have been great stotrams written about it. Samastestu vastu vanashutam ekam samastani vastuni yanashprishantim Vivadvatsara Shuta Achaswarupam Sanicha Palabdis Swarupohamatman Ganachana Dristur Ganachana Markam Yatas Nishprabham Mayate Jati Mudaha Tata Bhadavat Patiyo Mudha Drishte Sa Nichopalabdis Swarupohamatman Sa Nichopalabdis Swarupohamatman. As the Hasta Amalaka Stotram puts it, about Brahman, there is only this one, existing in all beings and all existing in it. It filters down and touches all hearts and minds, yet nothing can touch it. It is like the sky, Gagana. Remember, we have that word in the Avadhut too. It's like the sky, pure and serene, subtle and impossible to taint. That one am I. I am that one. There can be no other. Oh. Beautiful. And the Hasta Amalaka Stotram means, of course, a fruit in the palm of your hand. That's how subtle the Atman is, unseen like that. So now we can go on to Ishvara, because that's the third sloka and the second question. We had then these 40 questions raised for the sake of dissolving the misfortunes of living beings plunged in ignorance. Sloka 1. Sloka 2, what is Brahman? We did our best to answer that with 2 charts. You could say, though, actually, that let's look at a third chart, because the question may come, since it's so transcendent, then how can I approach it? So here's a chart that we haven't seen very much of lately that we can look at too, about the 4 ways of approaching Brahman. And this is according to Ishvara. In other words, what Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita about it. And this will only take a second. The 4 plateaus for approaching Brahman. So we had these 4 subtle stages of seeing Brahman just now. And before that, we had these collection of divine names or great Mahavakyas for talking or describing Brahman as far as possible. And now we have the 4 plateaus for approaching Brahman. Sri Krishna says, those who approach me with love and sincerity, I give them clear discrimination by which they can realize me. Beautiful way in which he puts it there, because they're approaching, of course, God with form, Krishna being the avatar of Vishnu or Ishvara we're talking about here in the Upanishad. So if they approach him with loving devotion and so forth, then he'll give them the discrimination by which they can separate the wheat from the chaff or go beyond names, forms, time, space, cause and effect, and karma, and actually plunge themselves into the ocean of the indivisible Brahman. It's very beautiful. So there are 4 plateaus for doing that, he says, after he gives this teaching. First, he wants you to fix the mind and its thoughts upon reality alone. That's Dhanur Rahitva Upanishadam Mahastram, right? We have that beautiful chant we've memorized out of the Upanishads, which says, Fix your mind upon Brahman alone. And the quote from him there is, of all yogis, that one who worships me with faith, his inmost self merged in me, that one I hold to be most devout and perfected in yoga. So this, of course, since there are plateaus here, this would be ideal to be able, if you can do that immediately, it would be the best of all four. Fix your mind and thoughts upon Brahman, because that's reality, and then you'll be able to merge into that. Secondly, if the mind will not concentrate, oops, and then we've got a little problem here in our sadhana, right? And that's at the sixth limb of yoga called dharana, because we can't concentrate. So we go back one limb. Maybe I haven't mastered limb 5 yet. That's called pratyahara. So I'm having a problem concentrating my mind, particularly on Brahman. At that point, maybe I can't even concentrate my mind fully on scripture, like we're doing right now for an hour and a half. And we'll do next Sunday, the Sunday after that Sunday. You get together with gurus and acharyas, teachers, and they help you sit for a long period of time. And there's no escape. They've got you prisoner. So you have to just sit there and listen, and then let's see what happens to the mind complex when you are exposed to that much truth for that much length of time. It's a very beautiful thing. We used to subject ourselves to the fire of that when we went to see Swami Asheshanandaji Maharaj. Peace and bliss be upon him always. And so my founder, Lex Hickson, would call me, oh, do you want to go do the austerity? He was in New York. I was in Hawaii. We flew halfway each 5 hours, came down in Portland, put ourselves under the control of Swami Asheshananda for a week at his ashram, and had to sit there and take in everything he said and all the purificatory things that he sent to us through the Dharma, through Atmagyan, and through meditation every morning and evening. And so that became this sadhana, spiritual practice, under which we got our expansion of mind. So here it says the mind will not expand, it will not concentrate, then engage it in constant practice. That's called abhyasa yoga. What is that? Abhyasa vairagyabhyam tan nirudaha, Father Yoga says in the Yoga Sutras. Tatra stitau yatno bhyasaha, he goes on. Basically, the seers all agree that abhyasa, constant practice, put together with vairagyam, detachment, is successful in destroying the unwanted waves of the mind. Isn't that beautiful? Right out of the Yoga Sutras. Raja Yoga, that's the big yoga, that's the yoga. So basically, that, engaging in that, those two put together. Later on, he says, if those two are brought together, what's that called? It's called authentic spiritual practice. But it has to be held for a very long time in an atmosphere of devotion. So you could see Sri Krishna here. They come to me with devotion. I see that they have that for me, and it's sincere and not running hot and cold like it does in people. Then I'll give them this discrimination called viveka vairagya, by which they can separate the wheat from the chaff, come straight to my essence, which is Brahman. Yes, there are people who want to just stay with Krishna and don't want to go to Brahman. We give it to them, fine. But we're saying here, making a lot of points that the classic Vedanta makes, particularly Advaita Vedanta, about the benefits that are there and coming to know the formless Brahman. And of course, some traditions, particularly Buddhism, are very deep into that. And also Sri Ramakrishna is called the avatar of this Kali Yuga. He was also constantly going into non-dual samadhi all the time and coming back to his love for Krishna and Ram, Shiva, and Divine Mother particularly. So this is a little bit about the second plateau here. I'm tripping up a little bit here. I went from one plateau, I couldn't quite make it. I tried to step towards it and I tripped over a stone in my mind somewhere, a mind stone. And so he says about that, Sri Krishna that is, the senses impetuously carry away the mind of the one striving for perfection. But the yogi, controlling them all, remains focused upon me and enjoys the bliss of uninterrupted wisdom. So as I was just saying, go put yourself in the fire. Find those beings who are availed, have availed themselves of Atmagyan, the highest wisdom. Sit there and just let it wash over you. Take it home with you after Shruti and contemplate it, manana, all day. It might even be running through your mind at work. See, you're doing your actions because you're it's the inanimate animator, right? So it's animating all that you do. I'll put yourself on automatic pilot, you see, automatic Purusha. And then, let the Lord exist as a presence, there. It is possible to, for all of those who are becoming so good and obviously are evidently at multitasking, to at least do two things: work and think of Brahman. And maybe you'll become so good at it that Brahman will be on, the work will become automatic pilot, and Brahman will be there as the inanimate animator. You'll feel like say, was it Saint Francis, or was washing dishes and saw God? So there are these saints and seers that have, in the midst of just mundane actions, have all of a sudden had their huge realization that they thought they'd get in meditation, you see, but never did. And so in that way, we want to bring Brahman to the fore as much as possible. Number 3 here, if practice is not possible, oops, there's a double ouch now. So you see, you started with outright, as I put my mind on Brahman, no interruptions. Then found out my mind couldn't concentrate. Now I'm finding out I can't even do practice. So it's a common complaint with people who haven't been raised in practice. Like in the West, we weren't, our parents weren't doing sadhana every day. They didn't get up for meditation and sit twice a day. Maybe some of them didn't even go out and do their work selflessly. So they weren't even karma yogis and yoginis. So there's a big admixture going there of prakriti with no Brahman, prakriti with no Purusha. And so therefore, later on, they find a guru or an acharya to teach them, and they complain, I can't focus my mind. I can't do what you tell me to do. Okay, here, take this mantra. I can't even do that, you see. So there's a need to expand the mind in its capacity to know Brahman. That's called tapas. You do some austerity. It's a little uncomfortable at first, but it does drive away the moisture from the mind, the moisture of ignorance. And then your mind dries out, as it were, and the sun of knowledge comes out. You see, then it's okay again. But that's not where we are right now. Back here to the person complaining. If practice is not possible, Krishna says, then offer all works to God. So here's why I mentioned karma yoga. Well, I'm not very good at meditation, and I can't study the scriptures. My guru can't even get through to me. I can't listen to his words, and I can't meditate in the morning. What's left? Well, there's work. So maybe I can learn how to do all work selflessly, or make it an offering to God, or in service of people. It'd be best in that order, offering to God first, and then as service to people. If God isn't in the picture for you, then serve people, and then it'll maybe lead that direction. But then here comes the 4th rub on the whole problem, is that if selfishness and agency still persist, then you have to abandon the fruits of work. So this is where, and did I read the quote there? Let's read the quote for number 3, back to if practice is not possible. The yogi, abandoning all attachment, performs work with body, mind, intellect, and senses for self-purification alone. And being untainted, dedicates all thoughts, works, and deeds selflessly to Brahman. That would be the solution for not only the third tripping stone, but the second one as well. So this is coming more into focus for people. We were talking about it at satsang and before that. And in the class yesterday for Indika Moksha that I gave, basically you bring these four yogas together, right? But if you can't do that, then you start off from the yoga that you're used to. What are you used to in this day and age in the West? Work. So you've got to undo the habit of working for selfish gains, that is, for getting fruits, because these fruits are not, number one, not real. Number two, they can't fulfill you. And number three, they come and go. This is the meaning of objects in Buddhism, for instance. They got 4 or 5 different meanings for you. I didn't bring that chart, but you can see it in footfalls. And if you find out that all of these things are ultimately not going to fulfill you and you have enough rounds of non-fulfillment with these objects and these desires that you have, at one of those rounds, you're going to start over and say, maybe I'll do all of this without attachment. Maybe I'll just give up my desire for fruits. Sometimes this happens through ignoble whips of pain. They say, basically, I really wanted that thing. I worked hard for it. I didn't make enough money on it. I lost the opportunity. So they give it up, right? What else can you do? Well, how about giving it up a little early? How about not having attachment to it at all and just say, well, mother brings it to me. I'll take it. If she doesn't, I'll accept it. So this is all down to the level of karma yoga and karma yogini and the karma yogi. That's why some people find out that if the world doesn't satisfy them, well, then I think I'll renounce it. You see, so Krishna says about that, and he puts it in a nice order here. Better indeed is knowledge than formal practice. Better than knowledge is meditation. Better than meditation is the renunciation of the fruits of action. Profound peace immediately follows renunciation. We were talking about that in terms of mature renunciation the other day, right? Remember, as we brought that up, that natural devotion just naturally turned into mature renunciation after a while. So I came up there with a little analogy I created on the spot in satsang. Say there's a sumptuous dessert. So you might have tasted it once and so forth. So it comes to you again, and so the first thing you say is, it's bad for me. The doctor says I can't have it. That's not mature renunciation yet. That's forced renunciation. Number two is that I had it once and it made me sick. So you're getting tired of the world because it's coming back to you in negative ways. It's not always pure. All these impurities come along and things aren't working right for you. There's a combination of good and bad and everything, positive and negative. So that's number two. That's, again, not mature renunciation. But if you can look at the dessert put in front of you and say, I've already tasted it, I don't desire it anymore. That's what mature renunciation is like. You're not attracted to it. You've had it, maybe not, but it doesn't attract you anymore. So this is how this love of the Lord turns into this beautiful mature renunciation. Chagi, it's called. So tapas to chagi. If you can't do the work, you do the austerity. And you do the austerity, you get renunciation. On the way, it would be very nice if you had devotion to the Lord, bhakti. So this is where bhakti and jnanam are the 2 wings of the bird. A teaching my teacher always told us almost every day that we went to hear his discourses. All right, so I knew it would take almost a whole class to try and answer the question, what is Brahman? But let's hear the Rishi, what he says about it a second time. Brahman is the ineffable spirit. It appears as the Mahat. So he's really clarifying things. God has a mind too. So God will stay distinct from the mind. Don't you go distinct from your mind when you meditate? Hopefully you can. Don't you go distinct from the mind when you're in deep sleep? Hopefully, of course, you will. So that's how Brahman can use as a matrix the Mahat, the great Sampkin. In the Mahat is everything. Brahman doesn't have to do anything but just be there and say Om. You see, utter its word, and then everything starts vibrating. Oh, you want me to manifest things? I've got it all here in order. Here we go, another round. So Brahman is the ineffable spirit. It appears as the Mahat, the great Sankhyan, then as the ego. Remember our seminar last weekend? It's right down in concordance with Copula's tattvas, right? Right out, you hit intellect, ego after you hit buddhi, mahat, and after ego comes then the mind and then the senses. That's what he's saying here. Mahat first, then the elements, that's the subtle elements, then air, ether, and the macrocosm, actions, knowledge, and its ends. All of this happens from Brahman down through Mahat, through ego. And of course, the senses are talking about is the tamasic side that comes out at the same time as the sattvic side. So the tanmatras and the 5 elements are going to happen in accord to form a platform, because this does need support. The supportless Brahman doesn't, Niralamba, but this does all need support. He continues in that sloka and says, it may be spoken of as pure, good, quiescent, and unqualified. Like Pafaft, I like to say, out of the Upanishads, pure, formless, actionless, and divine. Another way of using these beautiful words that we used to describe the indescribable. It's replete with all powers and is without beginning and end. So that's as much as they say about Brahman in the second sloka. The first sloka was what again? I will answer these final 40 questions to do away with the suffering caused by ignorance. So avidya is there, I'll give you avidya. You'll come out of that suffering. You'll become a great sampkin, merge with a Mahat, fall in love with Ishvara, and merge into the Supreme Brahman. We could end there, but we have some minutes still. The second sloka then, I'll repeat it. The question being, who is God? So, but you just talked about God, didn't you? You said, what is Brahman? No, I said, what? That's beyond personality. Now I'm saying who. Who is God in form, basically? So we have a distinction between Brahman and Ishvara here in our tradition. It's very good to know about because pretty much Ishvara means I'm safe. I have my salvation. But when you talk about Brahman, you say, now I'm liberated. You see, that's a distinction that India makes that I haven't found, because liberation isn't talked about in other scriptures that aren't Indian-based. Of course, Buddhism, I'm saying, is Indian-based. So he answers the question of who is God by saying this. God is the veritable Brahman. Might as well say that about all the next 38 questions. But it is the veritable Brahman that, depending on its power, called Prakriti, creates the worlds and enters into them as the inner ruler, the inner controller, seated in the heart. And he says here, seated in the heart of Brahma, not Brahman. Don't close the word with an N. Then you're back to the formless. But it's seated in the heart of Brahma, the firstborn, that is the Trinity. The first to appear out of the Trinity. That's going to be a question that comes after we answer what is Prakriti and who is the Supreme Self. That's next week. And then we'll get to who is Brahma, who is Vishnu, who is Shiva. But you can see how they're mentioning this before the questions come. So you can start thinking about, oh, I need to work this into the order of things too. So therefore, he concludes in Sloka 2, that is Ishvara, as he controls the intellect and the sense organs. So inner ruler controller means you've got 5 horses, a chariot, some reins running back to the hands of the driver, and then in the back you have Krishna sitting there guiding it. You see, that's the Gita image of the 5 horses, meaning five could be 5 senses and 5 elements are there. We have a chart on that. You can look at it in Footfalls. Then that connects back then to the chariot itself, which could be called the mind. Then there's the operator of the mind and senses in there. The reins are prana. And then there's Sri Krishna speaking in the air, be careful of that obstacle head, go left, go right, and guiding the whole thing. So that's what he's talking about here. That is Ishvara, as it controls the intellect and the sense organs. So we have enough time to bridge the subject of Ishvara, and probably the best chart to do so would be the immanent and transcendent reality. That's not going to take us but a few minutes to look at. Also in the book, Footfalls of the Indian Rishis. And we're taking here from the Svetashvatara Upanishad, because it's at the same time very good about talking about the subtleties of Brahman. Remember how they talked about that? It's like, the gold and mountain streams. It's like oil and sesame seeds. That's how the Svetashvatara Upanishads look at the subtlety of Brahman, the subtlemost. At the same time, let's find out what it says about Ishvara, because in the Svetashvatara Upanishad, sometimes they don't make a distinction for you. You say, what's he talking about now? Oh, he's talking about form. I thought you said he was just formless. You're going back like this, and they're not making a real clear distinction about that, as if the two are one. Guess what? You're right. But the distinction helps, again, because if you don't know about the formless Brahman, then you end up in a society, in a race at a span of time called the Kali Yuga, which doesn't know anything about liberation, doesn't know anything about formlessness, and can't get back to its source, which is transcendent reality. It's stuck in a penultimate position. Not a bad place to be, if you want to call Ishvara penultimate, but there are other places to get stuck in a descension into the world of name and form, as we can see by the world. So what does Svetashvatara Upanishad say about this immanent reality? Sometimes you can draw the distinction between immanent and transcendent there, because you see they're talking about a form, and then all of a sudden they're talking about something that's so subtle you can't find it, like you can't find oil and sesame seeds. So, quote, though the Lord, the cosmic projector of the heaven and earth realms, is one and indivisible, yet he is the real owner of all eyes, all faces, all hands and feet, integrated universes. It is he who inspires them all to do their respective duties in accordance with knowledge of the past actions and tendencies in various beings. So who doesn't love this? I mean, it was probably one of my earliest memories about India, before I even found Vedanta specifically, when I heard about Hinduism and the Gita and so forth. This image and this description stuck in my mind. He sees through all eyes. He hears through all ears. He works through all hands. He walks on all legs. I mean, that just all of a sudden, that's a combination of the transcendent and the immanent right there. So it made the bridge into something formless out of tired, old, tedious form that we were getting into with conventional religion, which didn't satisfy it, which made us go to India to look for these things. All of a sudden, we found it there in one statement. So this is one of the earliest charts I put together. And basically, what is that number of that? 32. So it's very early on. I said, I have to really put that in an image. So it was easily and readily found. There's the image. You can see all the gods and goddesses, most of them listed there. The god of the sun on the far right upper, Surya. The goddess of the moon, Chandra. There's Prajapati next to her. Prajapati is the great teacher. He comes with every cycle of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. The Prajapatis line up and come to teach men and gods. they are humans that teach the gods, basically. Very wise rishis. Hanuman's there listed. You see in the far right. You can see Shiva close there to Vishnu. You can see Vishnu on the other side of the transcendent Vishnu. Ganesha is there with his elephant's trunk. Lord Brahma is there. We just talked about him, the bearded one on the far left. And then you can see Indra, which we'll talk about soon here. He's coming up as one of these questions. Agni, the goddess of fire. Vayu, the god of fire. Vayu, the god of air. Varuna, the god of water. So all of these here are in this many heads, which they've probably the artists are saying, how am I going to depict that? You see, well, I'll just go at it and line them up on either side. And this is what happened. You could also say, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, and when Arjuna had his touch from Sri Krishna, and he saw the Vishvarupa Darshanam, they call it in the Gita, all of these hands, all of these mouths, all of these arms, and this was during a battle, so there was blood flowing in and out of the mouths. It was a horrific vision that the Lord himself was taking in everything that he produced again. And it came out and it's going back to him. And there was no birth and death going on. It's just one huge vision of the cosmic form, which is eternal. Right now we're calling that Ishvara, Mahat, and Buddhi, the intelligent part of everything. So that much I will give you as a tantalizer, because we'll start out next Sunday right there and do the other. You can read the Svetasvatara Upanishad yourself. It's not that long in the meantime. And we'll be able to take you to the second class of this beautiful Niralamba Upanishad. So let's end here our beautiful class. Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Ekam Eva Advaitiyam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Suridam Sarva Bhutanam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Sarvalokamaheeshwaram, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Atmani Vishwadarshanam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Manmai Mamupashita, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Vasudeva Sarvam, Shishtamam Upashitam, Vasudeva Sarvam. Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Tvaye Shritva Pranamami Mahodarmaho Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Hari Om